Hi, my name's Samuel Findlay, and you're listening to the ACES podcast. In this episode, I have a conversation with ACES Associate Director and Professor at Deakin University, Prof Forsyth. We chat about her career in science, her work in collaborations, the ACES journey and its legacy, and much more. So, let's get to the podcast. So I'm chatting to ACES Associate Director and Professor at Deakin University, Professor Prof Forsyth. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for the invitation to have a conversation with you.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. And first of all, how are you holding up and how's life been through COVID?
It's been different. It's been pretty a bit stressful working entirely from home. I like to work with people, and having to really be isolated from the group and working entirely from Zoom has been challenging, let's say, but coping all right otherwise, getting on with work.
So I guess going back to how you sort of began your career, why science?
Interesting question. I guess I was always really curious. How do things work? I'm being a bit of a nerd, a bit of a geek. Looking up at things like the electricity poles and thinking wires and thinking, how do the electrons go down those wires? Like really stupid things like that. But I was always really interested just in how things worked. I think that's really what led me into that path of science at high school and then subsequently at university.
Yeah, so you did your PhD at Monash, is that correct?
I did, yes.
Right, and where did you do undergraduate degree?
That was also at Monash. I had a bit of a different start. I went to university to undertake an engineering science double degree at Monash Uni, and back then when I was looking at what universities to go to, Monash had that unique opportunity to do that double degree where it was done like concomitantly at the same time. It wasn't like one degree then the other. And so I started off doing engineering subjects and science subjects, and I thought, I'll do science because it's fun, and I was going to do pure mathematics of all things, and I'll do engineering because it'll get me a job. And that was going to be chemical engineering actually. And then I think at the end of year one, I realised actually I don't want to be a chemical engineer, but I love materials engineering. And so I was doing materials science at the time as part of the double degree. And at the end of my second year, I was offered a research assistantship, I guess, in the physical chemistry department at Monash with now deceased Professor Ivan Wilson. And I just loved science. I thought, actually, I want to do research. This is the end of second year. And so I had to then make a decision. Do I do my engineering degree and get a job as an engineer? Or do I consider maybe swapping into science? And I remember having deep and meaningfuls with a lot of my lecturers and people in engineering and deciding, actually, I'm better off swapping into science. So then I finished my undergraduate degree in straight chemistry. I did physical chemistry, a lot of physical chemistry, materials chemistry, and then from there into honours and into a PhD.
So what was your PhD project on?
Again, very different to what I'm doing now. I guess, so again, going backwards a little bit, I always like to look at different problems. And I guess in honours, I took up the problem of, back then we were looking at using fluoride glasses as optical fibres to replace silica. That's what people thought would be the big inroads into optical fibre technology. It turned out it wasn't. Silica is still what we use. But I think in that project, I did a lot of materials, a lot of understanding around crystallisation, nucleation phenomena in glasses. And then in my PhD, I decided to take a completely different turn and go into that same phenomena, but in aqueous systems, in water. And the reason for that was because at the time, the IVF program was very big. Alan Trounson's team at Monash were working with my supervisor, who, of course, now is a long-term colleague, also at ACES, Professor Doug McFarlane. And we looked at how we can stop ice crystals nucleating in aqueous solutions so we could stop cells from being destroyed, basically. So the IVF group were wanting to add things to water to stop ice forming. So my PhD was cryobiology, crystallization and nucleation phenomena in aqueous solutions. Very different to what I'm doing now.
So after your PhD, did you jump straight into your research career or was there a gap?
I actually decided at that point I wanted to travel and I wanted to go overseas and do a postdoc, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do beyond that. So I looked at a number of opportunities. I wrote a lot of letters to various people all over the world. And I wrote some to people who were in my field at the time, the cryobiology field, and NMR, which is the tool I was using to understand the systems I was looking at. And I also wrote to others who were doing completely different things, which was in the battery area, looking at polymer electrolytes. And that was a group at Northwestern University. And I guess I got into that because as a PhD student, I was also doing some consultancy on the side to earn some money. And back then, the solid state polymer electrolytes were becoming interesting to make solid state devices. This is like 30 odd years ago now. And I was doing some work for Doug at the time, looking at making these solid state electrolytic capacitors with polymer electrolytes. But I didn't understand how they worked. Again, nucleation, crystallization, molecular transport, all in these materials, didn't have the opportunity to understand that. So I thought, well, maybe I can go overseas and learn about it. And so I wrote this email to professors at Northwestern and got the position and spent nearly 2 years as a postdoc in polymer electrolyte materials. And then I came home.
And then you were at Monash University again?
No. Then I came back. At the end of that period of time in America, I thought, I do not want to be an academic. This is just way too competitive, way too tough. Not for me. So I remember being asked by my advisors at Northwestern, Du Shriver, well, why don't you stay here and try and get a job in university? And I thought, no, not for me. Thank you, but no thank you. So I came back home. I was homesick as well. We came back home and I worked for DSTO, as it was known then, or Defence Science and Technology Organisation, in Maribyrnong, which is now no longer in existence. It's all in Fisherman's Bend. And that was in a completely different area again. I moved into conducting polymers, which is when I first came across Gordon Wallace, actually. So looking at conducting polymer like polypyrrole and polyaniline for use in military type applications. I didn't last there very long. I didn't really fit into that culture so well, I think. And I decided, actually, maybe I want to be an academic after all. And then I moved to Monash.
Great. So what were the type of things you were doing? Obviously, you were at Monash for some time, but what were the type of things you were doing there and the focus of your research?
Yeah, so I joined, even though I was a chemist, officially a chemist, I joined my old materials engineering department where I should have got my engineering degree. So I was teaching engineers. And being in an engineering department, I felt that I had to guide my research a little bit towards more applications and engineering type problems as opposed to the more fundamental problems that maybe we were doing back then in the science faculty. And so I started off actually continuing what I was doing in America, looking at solid state polymer electrolytes. And so I was using NMR, working collaboratively with Doug at the time in chemistry as well, using NMR to understand ion dynamics, ion motion, how to optimize conductivity in these polymer electrolytes for use in different devices, including lithium batteries. But at the same time, because I was in engineering faculty, that wasn't engineering enough. So one of my colleagues encouraged me to look at corrosion, so rust prevention. He said to me, never forget what he said to me. He said, I did my PhD looking at ions moving through polymers to stop electrochemistry, to stop corrosion. You're looking at ions through polymers to enhance corrosions in a battery. The same thing. So you can do corrosion research. So that's how I got into the corrosion area. And I remember I had some great times actually climbing up towers to set up various installations of cathodic protection systems, and as a very young academic, and learning to work with industry actually that's where I first learned to work with industry, because it was really hard to get funding for dirty research, as it was called, corrosion research.
Sure.
Then. And so my research in that corrosion area was always funded by industry, people who are looking at fixing corroded concrete bridges or steel poles or electricity poles. So that's how I got into the corrosion related work. But at the same time, my heart was always in understanding how ions move through electrolyte materials for battery applications.
So how did the eventual move to Deakin come about?
Yeah, I wasn't looking to move necessarily, but we had ACES set up and running at Monash, and I think that's right. I'm trying to think how that happened. So I was in a mentoring program at Deakin where I was mentoring a younger academic who actually now is a DVCR at another university in Victoria, and I was exposed to the Deakin environment. And they invited me to come and give a talk at the Institute annual event in November. And then they invited me to come and have a look at what is now IFM, the Institute. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Just the whole environment, the whole feel of collaboration, and it just seemed really positive vibe. And so I remember coming back from that thinking, maybe in 5 years' time, I might go to them and say, would you be interested in me moving to Deakin? And about 2 weeks later, I had an email from the then director of the Institute, Peter Hodgson, and said, "We hear you quite liked our environment. Would you be interested in moving to Deakin?"
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh, okay. It's about 5 years too early for me, having young kids that don't want to go to Geelong. I said, I can't come to Geelong, I'm sorry. I said, if you had labs at Burwood, that would be different. And lo and behold, they built labs at Burwood, and the rest is history. So I'm there now.
So what are you currently working on? Obviously, there's a lot of things that you're involved in, but, your battery work and some really exciting collaborations. But I'm wondering, what are some of the current projects that you're working on right now?
Okay, so in the battery area, I guess we've got a lot of interest at the moment around lithium metal batteries. And so I'm really excited by actually translating that into maybe a spin out. So we're talking about with some of the guys here at Deakin and others about looking at trying to actually create next generation, not lithium ion batteries that we all know of, but lithium metal batteries, so much higher energy density. We can make these devices that work at much higher temperatures. So that's really exciting on one hand. On the other hand, next generation technology around sodium batteries is really exciting. And in that case, on the fundamental level, understanding how to control ion transport both in the bulk but also through the interface, and how to control it such that you can get longer lasting batteries, performing at high temperatures and higher voltages. And so I'm really excited by the application side, but also by the understanding, using molecular dynamic simulations and NMR to understand how you can control ion transport, basically. And that's on the battery side. And on the other side, which is related, I have a corrosion project with one of my younger colleagues, Anthony Summers, here at Deakin, but also the microbiology group at Deakin and over in Curtin, looking at new organic salts or corrosion inhibitors that can stop both corrosion at an interface of, say, steel, but also stop microbial corrosion, so stop the formation of biofilms and stop bugs, basically, or bacteria eating away at the steel, which causes a huge problem when it comes to industry and corrosion related issues.
So you've obviously had many great achievements throughout your career and, have been awarded many things, but I wonder if there's anything that really sticks out as something that you're most proud of throughout your career.
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind for me is the creation of the team that we have, both at Deakin and across the ACES and across international, across the world, actually. So for me, it's about the people, not just about one particular thing that I've done, that I've achieved. I think what I like most about my work is interactions with people, which is why I find COVID so difficult. And I think the team environment and creating the right culture, I'd say that's my best achievement. If I really look at what's important to me, getting that culture of educating the younger generation, and I mean in the research context, and getting the right culture of collaboration to solve any problem. And really, if you're working collaboratively with the background, with the tools that we have at our disposal, we can solve pretty much any problem in the material science space, particularly in electrochemistry space. And I think that's my biggest achievement. It's the people that we have around us. That will be my biggest achievement.
Great. And you've been a pioneer, I guess, for women in STEM. I wonder if you have any advice for women currently pursuing a career in science and research.
Just do it. No, quite seriously. Look, it is challenging. It is challenging still for young women in academic career, and actually even just in science, in STEM full stop, whether it's academia or in industry. And part of that has been the lack of role models. I think people say that if you can see it can be done, you can do it. And if you don't have those role models, it's just a little bit more challenging. It's also the challenge of trying to balance, particularly the older generation, but probably still true, balance the commitments of being, if you have children, being a mother, being a doing your job and being a spouse, all those things. I know they're also there for young men. I accept that they're also there for young men, but there's still something culturally that makes it a bit harder, I think, for young women who want to have a career, but also want to have a family. So that, I think, still is something which needs to be addressed, and I think across the world people are looking at that with terms of funding and whatnot. But that, I think, is a challenge. But you just have to. I think my advice is you just have to ask for help when you need help. Be confident. Be assertive when you need to be assertive, and believe in yourself, and just have a go.
Yeah, great. And something I've asked everyone that I've had on the podcast so far is whether or not they have a morning routine or something that they do. It doesn't necessarily have to be a morning routine, but just something that they do every day that it helps them approach a day of work.
Exercise. I do. I typically, it's been hard through COVID, but I typically would either go to the gym or go for a run or go for a walk or do some form of exercise. And actually, in this period of COVID, I've also begun to do some meditation.
Oh, great.
Some meditation, even just 10 minutes in the morning, just to set the scene, set my mind straight, to help get through the day.
Great. And I wonder, is looking back on the ACES journey thus far, and I guess the ACES legacy, I guess, how could you sum up the experience? Wow,
it's been a long journey. I think the original ACES was called ACNE back in 2001 or 2, or I can't remember now, but that was a Australian Centre for Nanostructured Electromaterials. Very poor choice of name. ACES is a much better name.
Yep.
I guess the journey then, there was like a handful of us then, right? And that just goes back to building teams and building groups. There was a handful of people who had like-minded ideas and similar culture and wanted to collaborate and solve real problems. And what's happened over the journey is that has been added to and grown, and we've just got this enormous network now of alumni and colleagues that have really enriched all aspects of our science. For me, one of the things I can really point to is the involvement of the ethics group from the early stage with Sue Dodds when she was at UOW, and then the growth of that into the other areas around ethics and the EPPE, as we call it now, or ethics, policy and public engagement.
Yeah. And
for me, the learnings from that personally and how I address my science and my research and how that impacts on choices we make for doing particular research, that has been really a big thing. I would not have happened, I think, without the ACES family. And just the people and the collaborations and the friendships that we made along the way have been pretty amazing, actually.
Well said. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me and taking the time to have a chat. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to the ACES podcast. For more episodes like this one, be sure to subscribe wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also find more information about ACES on our website, electromaterials.edu.au. There you'll find links to our various social media platforms. And you can also follow me on Twitter @SamuelFindlay. Until next time, thanks for listening.